Jamie, thanks very much for making time to speak with me as we're speaking right now. Where are you exactly right now? Because I'm just assuming you're on this amazing 90s tour that is going to be coming to the Fallsview Casino, and we cannot wait to see all of you here on this side of the border.
I am in Los Angeles, California at home for a change, but I am gearing up and looking forward to coming out there to seeing all of y'all.
Now, before we get into anything else, because would love to talk about the history of the band and everything, what is this show going to be about, man? I mean, like I said, it's old school, it's 90s nostalgia. Who's going to be on it? What can we expect?
Well, you can expect a whole lot of fun, a whole lot of great memories coming right back at you. As soon as you hear these records, you'll remember what you were doing and who you're doing it with. You can expect all our brothers there, Young MC, Vanilla Ice, Color Me Bad. We've all been touring together now since 2015, as well as some of the other artists that aren't on this particular show, but we've been doing it for a minute and having a great time, and the audiences are always having an amazing time as well.
I was going to say, man, what is it like for you to not just perform for the fans who grew up with you guys, but also the new fans? Because the old school fans are adults and they're bringing their kids to see this show to hopefully experience what they experienced when they were young.
Yeah, it's always both a trip and also it's always really cool because it was the same way for me growing up. My parents love music. I got a chance when I was young to see Earth, Wind, and Fire and to see some of the greats because they took me and they shared all that music with me, which in turn kind of got me into the old school, as my friends used to call it at the time. And to be able to do the same, hopefully, for a whole other generation. And plus, we've been very blessed that our music has been shared as well as been in, different movies from the Minions all the way to Just Friends. And recently we were, it was in some commercials for Gain, laundry detergent, and for Microsoft Xbox. And so there were a lot of kids that were exposed to our music, through other means. And it's just been really cool when we look out in the audience and we see parents and their kids. It just for me it's something that I always hope we would be able to do with our music.
I always say this, no disrespect to the artists of today. And I have to make that clear because I'm going to make a statement. I always considered the 90s to be the last um, decade where, and I'm going to say the term, real singers came from, meaning, of course, that you can turn all the instruments down and just have artists like yourselves stand in front of the microphone and sing. That's the way I've always felt. I didn't feel that way in the 2000s. I didn't really feel that way in the 2010s, but I always felt that the 90s was the last that could compare with the 80s, definitely the 70s, 60s, and so forth going back. Do you agree or disagree? And if so, either way, uh, what's your feeling about that?
Well, I agree. I agree. And I don't want to sound like the old grandpa shaking his stick in his front yard telling people to get out of his lawn, but I completely agree. It was like, in the 90s, it wouldn't just be one artist here or one artist there that really could blow. It was everybody, like everybody could really sing. And it was more about just making sure that all the artists had great songs to fit their great voices. And then, yeah, it started to change. It started to become more about, well, do you look good and can you dance? What we can, there's auto tune now. We can make you sing well, and we started getting away from that. And in every decade, including now, you have one or two or a couple artists here or there who are really good, but then you have a whole bunch of them who just look good and can dance and know the right people. And in the 90s, I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody as well. It just is what it is. And you had a lot of artists. I mean, you could go through, the record store, you could go through Tower Records or Sam Goody and go through every aisle, the pop rock, the R&B, all of it, the country, and it was like just full of amazing artists.
I've always said that, people like Adele, amazing singer, but if she sang back in the 60s, she'd be one in a dozen. And I always felt
Hmm.
that way with the artists that, that would you put into the 90s? I mean, again, it would be one in a dozen because all, like you said, all you guys could sing all, and it's not just singing. And I want you to explain this part too, that people have to
Hmm.
understand. It's not just singing, it's touching and emotion that your songs helped people laugh, cry, you brought people back together, you made babies, you know, your songs were played in funerals, you guys were played in weddings, graduations. Like when you think about that and how much your music, you guys, all for one, was such such relatable to people's lives in so many different ways. How does that feel knowing that you've touched so many people in so many ways?
Well, I think that's what every artist dreams of having, is having that type of music, of what you just said, that really touches people, that people make this music a part of their memories and a part of their life. Um, not every artist has the ability to have music that translate that way. And I do a lot of producing when I'm not working with All for One, and I've worked with a lot of different artists. And one of the things I do with every artist is I sit down with them and I say, listen, we have to figure out together the emotion of this record, because I feel in today's music, emotion has been stripped from the music. You just hear it and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, the beat sounds good, and you might dance or whatever, but there's not too many songs anymore that when it comes on, if it's a sad song, it makes you feel sad. If it's a happy song, you just can't keep still. It's like, man, I just got to get up. You know, a lot of those type of records don't really exist as much anymore. And when they do come out, they're monsters, because people nowadays, the generation, they don't really understand what they're feeling because they don't feel it often when they listen to their music. And I just think that every artist, especially when we started, wanted to have the type of records that sparked an emotion and made people run to the record store. Because remember, we didn't have iTunes. When our records came out, there was no Spotify. There was Tower Records. There was Sam Goody. There was the Warehouse. There were all these record stores, physical places you had to run to. And the goal was, all right, let's give them something that let's give them not only something to talk about, but let's give them something to go get.
It's not just that, too. I believe that the 90s was the last generation where they quote unquote slow danced.
Yep.
These days, I don't even know if the kids even know what those two words mean. And the other thing, too, your music and going to 90s and go back 80s, 70s, 60s, it taught people how to, it helped, I shouldn't say taught people, it helped people how to speak to each other when it became an emotional attachment. When maybe,
Mhm.
and I know I did this with songs from the 60s and 70s, if I didn't know exactly how to say the words, I'd remember some lyrics and I try to
Yep.
interpret that and use that to speak to somebody who I was interested in, or how to express myself to that other person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, I can't tell you the amount of times, especially with guys, guys would come
Yeah.
up to us and say, I wanted to propose to my girl, but I just didn't know how to say it. So I just sat her down and played I Swear and told her this is exactly how I feel, you know. And we would get so many people who would say that. And it's funny that you should say that, because, even for me as a kid, my very first girlfriend, she asked me one time, she's like, if I were gonna break up with you, what song would you play to get me back? And I played her La 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 Means I Love You, which was a remake that the Jets
I,
did.
I
And she's
know the
like,
song, I know the original, and I know the Jets version.
okay, so I played her that, and she's like, "Oh, that's stupid. I'm breaking up with you." I think she just wanted to break up anyways. You know what I'm saying? She just wanted to break my heart so she could see how I felt. But at the same time, it was like one of those things that in my entire life, and I was 12 years old then, music was always something like, "Yeah, let me play you this song," or if there was someone you really like, you might even make them a mixtape. Like, "Hey, girl, I want you to listen to this because every song on this tape is how I feel." You know what I'm saying?
I would, if she had asked me that, I would have went with the Commodores easy, because either way you
Ah,
win. I would have went with that
yeah.
one. Yeah, yeah.
I didn't think of that one.
Tell me something, man. I want to go back to the beginning, and you kind of talked about growing up and listening to music, but how did the boys get together? How did they become the princes of romance? How did that all happen?
Well, so Tony and Alfred. So Tony is the tall white guy. Alfred is the shorter Mexican guy. Tony sings all the high notes. Alfred sings all the bass. So they went to high school together and had known each other for a while. I met them right after they were out of high school, and I was just finishing at a talent show. And we all exchanged numbers and became friends. We did radio station jingles together. And one time Tony and I entered a karaoke show because we were broke and needed some money. And they were the local radio station Hot 97 was giving away $977. And so we get there and we're trying to win this money. And we see this little shorter black dude on his knees rolling around like he was Patti LaBelle singing the song from the 80s called At This Moment by Billy Vera and the Beaters.
I remember
And
it.
so so I said to Tony, I was like, yo, we're not gonna let that little dude take our money. We got to figure out what we could do and make sure we go get this cash. So we decided, we were dressed in black and white. We decided to sing Ebony and Ivory. And I said, Tony, we got to take it to church. And we took Ebony and Ivory to church, and we all tied that night. And anyways, neither one of us came back to win, but we all met each other and we won in life. And not too long afterwards, I met a producer at my church who gave me a cassette of our very first song, So Much in Love. And he said, listen, I work for an independent record label. If you can put together a group and learn the song, I can get you a record deal. So I said, okay. Of course, I called Tony, Alfred, and Delius. We went to Six Flags Magic Mountain, walked around the park, singing and practicing everywhere. We got the audition for that label. They signed us on the spot. And believe it or not, that was 30 years ago.
It's interesting you say this, and we're going to talk about the hits in a second, but one of the things I always remember when we were going into the 90s was the fact that the term boy band started to develop. But it was weird. If you were white, you were a boy band. But if you were black or describing your band, you
Hmm.
were an R&B group.
Right.
I've asked this to other people before, and I'll ask you this because I'd love to hear what is there an actual difference? Because New Edition wasn't uh, a boy band; they were a group. But if you
Right.
looked at somebody like NSYNC was considered a boy band.
Right, right. Well, it kind of started with Backstreet and NSYNC at the late 90s. That's when they started calling people boy bands. And to me, a boy band had the connotation of a group who had been put together by outside sources and, was kind of like manufactured. They're like, we're going to find you the best records and we're going to make sure everybody can dance and everybody has can look good. And it had that connotation that it was, something that had been put together. Um, but you're right. It was like nobody ever called us boy bands. And honestly, nobody had really called New Kids on the Block a boy band in the 80s. They were just a band. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't until, like I said, Backstreet and NSYNC came out that the term boy band was coined. And then they started calling every band that had guys in it, they started calling them boy bands. I remember some of our first interviews, and they're like, "How's it feel to be a boy band?" Like, we're men, and we've never been a boy band, and you know, but now we were like, okay, well, we're all older. You want to call us boys? That's fine.
But did you realize you were following in the footsteps from, say, the Jackson Five to the Dramatics to the Manhattans to the Temptations to the OJs, Tavares, and knowing that you were part of that lineage? Oh, I'm saying the word right. I probably stumbled over it, but you understand
No,
what I
no,
mean, though. Did
yeah.
you realize you were following in those footsteps of those great vocal groups of
Oh,
R&B?
yeah, most definitely. That was our goal. Our goal when people used to ask us, what is it that you want to accomplish as a singer? And we would say, we want to be like some of the big groups, especially someone's like look at the Four Tops. Those guys literally sang together their entire lives almost until they were no longer here. They all sang together. And that was our goal. Our goal was always like, listen, we signed up to do this. We signed up to do it forever, or for as long as the Lord will allow us. And, we might even do some solo stuff in between, but the group will always be the base because that's, we all had tried for a long time solo, and that just didn't work. It didn't work until we came together as all for one. And so that kind of let all of us know that, that was God's plan for us. And we just have to honor that and keep moving. And, you know, so now here we are 30 years later. And we saw an article not too long ago that we're talking about, some of the longest groups to be together. And believe it or not, we're on the list. Literally, we started in 93. August of 93 is when we got signed, and November of 93 is when our first song came out. And we're still here, the same original four of us, and still doing it. And and we are grateful for all the groups that opened the doors for us, to walk through, and who gave us an example of something to try to accomplish. And hopefully we've done the same for the groups that have come after us.
What was the song, do you think, that put you guys over so that it wasn't just local, it was now worldwide?
Oh, it was So Much in Love. So Much in Love. It was an a cappella record. So Much in Love shot to number 4 on the Hot 100 with a bullet. The only reason it didn't go number 1 is they actually pulled it because they wanted I Swear to come out in time for the Grammy voting. Because the Grammy has a cutoff. If you don't
Yes.
make the cutoff, you have to wait until the following year. And then you have a lot of people looking at you strange because it's like, well, your record came out like last year. Why are you winning a Grammy now? So they wanted to make sure we would make that cutoff. But at the same time, the other song, So Much Love, was still zooming up the charts. But radio at that point would only play one song from you. They wouldn't play two. And it was like a thing of we had to choose. So we had to pull So Much in Love. But So Much in Love is the song that makes it possible for us to tour and to be here, because without that, there wouldn't have been I Swear.
But I swear, why do you think that became so iconic to the point where the song was being done not just as an R&B song, it was being done as a country song, it was being done as a reggae song, it was being done in so many different genres. What is it about that song that just keeps going on and on and on?
Every artist dreams of having one of those songs that I like to call the perfect storm. It's the perfect storm because it is the perfect marriage between the three parts that make up a song in my mind. The three parts that make up a song are music, melody, and lyrics. And when you have just this perfect marriage between all three of those, and then I'll add one more in there, emotion, right? It's just when the lyrics hit a certain point that when you hear it one time, not only do you remember the melody, but you start to remember the majority of the lyrics that you heard from one listen from radio. Those are the type of songs everyone prays that they will have in their careers. And when I Swear came out, it was just one of those songs. Well, I don't know if you know this. It was actually the country song first,
Yes.
and a guy named John Michael Montgomery had done the song. And when we did a version of it, and David Foster, who had produced "I Will Always Love You" for Whitney Houston, produced ours and told us he was going to do the same thing for us. And when we entered the charts, we entered at number 72. John Michael's version had crossed over. He was number 70. And at that time, country records didn't cross over to the pop charts. But the song was such a strong song. Everybody, well, Doug Morris at Atlantic Records, who at the time was the president of Atlantic, he was just like, I know that this is one of those monster records that if I get the right R&B, group to sing it, not only will it cross over, but it'll be a worldwide hit for them. And he was correct. It was just one of those things. Every country we would go to, our version would, might be number 1. And then there would be a local artist who did a version and it would be number 2 or 3. And every country we would go to, and at that time, it felt like we went to all of them. When we got there, there would always be 2 versions of I Swear on the chart, a local one and ours.
What was it like working with David Foster? Of course, Canadian, super producer, working with everybody that you can imagine. What was it like working with him and having his magic touch your music?
Well, the funniest thing is, so when we first worked with him, it was for a song that I had written on our first album called "Oh Girl," and so they were like, "Hey, we're gonna get David Foster to produce this," and all the guys were so excited, and I was like, what? Who's David Foster?" Like I didn't know, because in my household growing up, we never really listened to anything that was an R&B, gospel, jazz, or funk, and I didn't know. So then they started to tell me, and I started saying, "Oh my God." So I started to get super nervous. But the good thing was, once I got a chance to work with him, and it was just me and him for most of the record, he had the background, he had the guys come in after me. um, he and I started to just kind of develop a rapport and become, you know, I would think friends. And then, our entire album was actually completed. And that's when we got called into Atlantic Records offices and they played us the country version of I Swear and asked us what we thought of it. And we were like, "Oh, it's a nice song. It's great." And then Doug Morris said, "Well, I want you guys to do it. And we're going to get David Foster and he's going to produce it and do for you, what he did for Whitney." And I
Wow.
was I was a little hesitant because I was like, "Well, our album is done. It's at mastering." And he said, "Just let me worry about that." And so he said, "Okay." And for the first 250,000 copies of our album, I Swear wasn't even on in the artwork. It was just a big red sticker on the case that said also includes the hit I Swear. But to bring it back around, as far as working with David, that was our second time working with him. So we were a lot more comfortable. And it was pretty cool because he had just built this really dope studio at his house. And so I got a chance to go out to Malibu. And once again, he started with me. And I was like, in between takes, he had a giant trampoline. So me and all his kids, Brody and all of them, we'd be out in the trampoline and playing basketball. And he'd be like, "Jamie, get back in here," and then I had to run back in all sweaty, finish singing. And it was just a fun experience. And then next thing you know, man, that record comes out and just zooms up the charts. In 5 weeks, it gets to number one, and then it stays there for 11 weeks. And we tie with Elvis for the third longest number one in Billboard history at the time.
Speaking of Canadians, what did you think of Ryan Reynolds' interpretation in the movie Just Friends when he played the large friend singing that song? And it does through the movie, and definitely at the end they do a interpretation of himself singing that. What'd you think of that?
Oh man, we thought it was hilarious. I'm such a fan of Ryan Reynolds. I think he is just completely awesome. I support all his movies when I can, and when he did that, man, I can't tell you how many phone calls all of us kept getting. "Yo, you gotta watch Just Friends. You gotta watch Just Friends. You gotta watch Just Friends." And then I remember I finally watched it and was crying, laughing throughout the entire movie. He did such an amazing job, and we have nothing but just love and respect for that guy.
Keeping it Canadian, do you remember performing in Toronto during that era?
Oh yeah, we remember not only Toronto but throughout all of Canada, and so as I was telling you, I do a lot of production, and one of my production partners, Jason, is actually from Canada, and so at the
Yes.
time, his little sister was opening for us. Her name was Joanne, and they followed us all around Canada, and every time we went to Canada, we always had such an amazing time. And I got a chance to go quite a bit recently because with all my production, I do a lot of work with Disney, and they shoot a lot of their movies up there. So I got a chance to go to Toronto quite a bit to work with the cast and record them, as well as on the West Coast, and um, go up there as well. And so we have nothing but love for Canada, man. I honestly, if I ever really did have to move, I'd have no problem heading up north and hanging out with y'all.
You guys had a tough time when it came to the charts. Even though you had success, it didn't come to you
Hmm.
on a silver platter because when you had groups like SWV and so many other great R&B groups that were going around who all could sing,
Hmm.
every single one of them, we could throw out all the names out there. What was it like knowing that every time you had a hit, you literally had to look over your shoulder because somebody else was creeping up behind you to take that spot?
I mean, listen, it's either you relish competition or you're scared of it. And I
Mhm.
think in every area, I'm a huge NBA basketball fan. When Michael Jordan was playing, I'm sure Magic Johnson, Larry Bird weren't like, oh man, we probably should just hang up our shorts. They were like, nah, Michael's good, but so are we. So let's go show the world what we do as well. And I'm a person where I just feel like nothing happens by accident. Everything happens because it's supposed to happen. I'm a very religious person, if you want to call it that, and I just feel like when God opened those doors for you, there's a reason that they're open. So it's either you run through and you do your best, you give your best, and you welcome the competition, or you're scared of it and you just go do something else. So at the time, we all would like cheer each other on. We used to tour all the time, and Brandy would open for us, or Escape, or Jeanne, and we were all like friendly with each other. And when we see each other, like, man, I love your records, and they say the same back to us, and we chop it up and be friends. And it's the same now. So I just think that there's room for everyone, and we were never scared, but yeah, we were like, okay, we just got to step up our game, make sure we do our best, and then let the chips fall where they may.
Did you guys do any TV show appearances? Because back then, CW and even ABC, and they started having NBC more black comedy shows.
Yeah.
Like, were you guys ever guest stars on it, and do that maybe one song, that one hit on the show? So, what shows were they?
um we did Family Matters. That was a lot of fun. At the time, our single "She's Got Skills" was out, and they were doing this whole like dance contest thing, and so we went on there and did "She's Got Skills." um we did a lot of like kid shows as well, like Weird Al
Mhm.
Yankovic show. We did we also were on General Hospital, believe it or not, doing the same thing. Yep. um I'm trying to remember, we did quite a few different fun things that we loved,
Mhm.
and then of course all the late night stuff. But yeah, we did a few.
Well, how important was fashion back then for y'all?
Hey, we were young kids. Fashion was everything, but it was the 90s, so everything was baggy and colorful.
Mhm.
If it was cross colors or Carl Kanai or Pele Pele, or all that stuff. And then of course, in the early 90s, when I was just getting out of high school, it was all about the silk shirts. Guys had to get
Yes.
a silk button down, and you'd have to have a button, I mean, all the way to the top. And so all of those things were always important to us because we were young guys as well, and we wanted to be cool and whatnot. So it was always a lot of fun.
Yeah. I would probably say the most for fun was winning a Grammy. What was that like?
Oh, that was amazing. I mean, it was really fun, but it was also unexpected in a way, because we knew we were up for the Grammy and we thought we had a really good chance to win it, but we didn't find out until the night before that the category we were in this was gonna be the first telecast where they did some off off TV, like it wasn't gonna be telecast.
Mhm.
And so we were getting ready at our hotel, and there's a knock on the door. We opened the door, and it was Entertainment Tonight, the TV show. And they're like, "All for one, you just won the Grammy." We're like, "Wait, what?" And so when we went to the Grammys, we went a lot happier than a lot of the other artists who didn't know if they were going to win yet, because we already knew we had won. So we were skipping to the Grammys because we were like, all right, yeah, we won.
Things started to change, and I know we don't have a lot of Zoom time, but things started to change. Napster coming into play.
Hmm.
Larger record companies or smaller record companies were being bought out by bigger record companies. The music landscape was changing also. We talked about auto tunes and things like that. How much did that part start to affect the getting your music out there to the fans?
Well, anytime you have huge change, there's always a weird period where you have to get used to that change. And as you said, as we were talking earlier, when our records came out, there were record stores. So most of our fans who were growing up with us, we were, getting married ourselves and having young kids, and so were our fans. But our fans were still into CDs, still into physical music that they could touch. And that was starting to go away, and the record stores were closing. So it was an awkward period for a lot of groups like us, because a lot of our fans were some of the last to embrace the technology. So we just had to keep it moving. Thank God for us, we've always had a very strong international fan base as well, especially in Asia. So when people were always like, "Well, what were you guys doing between these periods?" Like, "Oh, we were in Asia working," because over there they were still, even to this day, they're still the largest CD buying public in Japan, and they really support live music. So we just had to kind of navigate our way through those waters while technology was taking its time to you know to get into the hands of all of the people, the older, the younger, and everyone in between. um and then now we're at a point where, yeah, we can release music now, and all of our fans, and of course
Yeah.
the younger generation that listens to us, they can all access it very easily. But there was that kind of that weird period in the middle of what's going to happen.
Is there new music coming from you guys? Can we expect new
Yeah,
music this year, or was there new music released last year, or coming up even in 2025?
yeah, we're working on new music now for our 30th anniversary, and we're just trying to wrap it up. But we've got some stuff that we're super excited about, some stuff that kind of takes us right back to our roots, and what made us popular. So we're excited, and hopefully you'll hear it soon.
Last question, or well, almost last question. What advice
Okay.
can you give the young folks out there who want to do what you guys did, like a doo-wop group, a group that blends their
Mhm.
voices together, but then at the same time can shift it so that these each one has a moment to stand out? What advice can you give
Mhm.
them?
Well, my first piece of advice to all artists always is to really practice and work on your craft.
Mhm.
Study, study. You guys, the young kids have YouTube. We never had that. The only studying we could do is, wait till Saturday till Soul Train was coming on, or some type of show, and reading the TV guide to find out, well, when's the next music show, and then trying to see it that way, or going to
Mhm.
concerts. But now these kids have it at their fingertips. I could say to them, you should study Donny Hathaway, Prince, and Stevie, and they literally can just go on YouTube, type that in, and see all kinds of live performances and everything by any artist that they want. So my thing is, you got to, whether it's in life, or it's and when I say in life, I mean, if you go to school and you want to be a lawyer, what do you have to do? You have to study. You have to get into books, and you have to get that information, that knowledge. And I really believe, like I said earlier, every artist who has come before us has opened doors for us to run through. Every artist that came before us went through all of the trials and the tribulations that we may face. So if you want to have a leg up on those situations when they come to you, when you get to that fork in the road, if you have studied, if you have paid attention to the greats, then you can have a leg up, and kind of know how to deal with certain situations, as well as when you see people who were great, who did it before you. There, I think that one time I had a conversation with Babyface, and I was asking him how I could be a better songwriter like him, because in the 90s he ruled the airways.
True.
And he said to me, be a clever thief. And I said, because I had always been a clever thief, meaning when I grew up, I learned how to do a lot of runs from Aretha Franklin and Stevie Wonder, but I learned how to put the emotion of a song, how to put that emotion in it from the Donny Hathaways and the Marvin Gayes, and then I learned how to be a showman from the Michael Jacksons, the James Browns, and the Princes. So, you always you steal a little, you take a little from this one, from that one, from this one, and you add it to who you are, and then you create something new. And I think when you put that time into your craft, into trying to be the best, into trying to raise the bar, and taking a little from here and there from the folks who came before you and adding it to who you are, then that's when you can create something that other artists one day will look up to you and try to figure out how they can inject a little of who you are into them.
And you definitely did it for all of us. My friend, thank you so much for this interview. Have a great show. I know fans are going to love this. Old school or new school, it's great music. It's going to be a great show with all of you coming together. What a way to bring back nostalgia in such a cool way. Thank you again for this interview, and thank you again for the years of great music.
Thank you, and thank you for having me and for this platform for all of us artists to talk. We appreciate you, my brother, and I hope we see you at the concert.
Hell yeah, my friend. Hell yeah. Thank you again.
All right, be well.